Happy morning to you all. Today we are going to learn about the story The Night the Ghost Got In. It's a short story by James Grover Thurber. This was written as a fictionalized account of a night he remembers as a child when he was a misunderstanding about footsteps in the kitchen turned into a mess involving a wounded police officer and a broken window. Exactly, the story took place on the night of November 17, 1915. The story begins with the young James Thurber, who is the narrator, hearing footsteps as he takes a bath. It's around 1 o'clock in the morning. A rhythmic, quick cadence walking around the dining room table. Everyone is asleep. His brother in a bedroom down the hall, his mother in one room upstairs, and grandfather was in the attic. Attic means it's nothing but a room which was partly inside the roof of the building. In the same building, it is also partly inside. He is sleeping in the old walnut bed. The steps kept going round and round the table at regular intervals. A board creaked. When it was trod upon, I supposed at first that it was my father or my brother Roy, who had gone to Indianapolis but were expected home at any time. I suspected next that it was a burglar. I did not enter my mind until later that it was a ghost. At first, James thinks that the footsteps might belong to his father or brother, who had been traveling to Indianapolis and were supposed to be back late in the evening. The footsteps go around and around the dining room table, and James quickly realizes that it isn't his father and brother. He assumes then that there is a burglar in downstairs. He wraps a towel around his waist and immediately gets out of the bath to investigate. James wakes up his brother Herman, who is dead asleep in his bed upstairs. Herman is notoriously jumpy, and James has to reassure him that he isn't an intruder before Herman calms down enough to listen. James tells Herman that there are footsteps downstairs that might belong to a robber. There's something downstairs, Herman. He got up and followed me to the head of the back staircase. The steps had ceased. There's something down there, Herman, I said. James said. Instantly the steps began again, circled the dining room table like a man running, tut, like that, and started up the stairs downwards as heavily, two at a time. The two boys waited at the top of the stairs, listening for the sound of the steps. The light still shone palely down the stairs. We saw nothing coming. Nothing is there. We only heard the steps, the sound of the footsteps. Herman rushed to his room because of the fearfulness and slammed the door. I slammed shut the door and the stairs stopped and held my knee against it. After a long minute, I slowly opened it again. There was nothing there. There was no sound. None of us ever heard the ghost again. After waiting for a few moments, the boys hear the footsteps and are alarmed. Suddenly, the pace of the steps quickens and sounds as if they are coming up the stairs, headed straight for the terrified boys. James and his brother Herman run back to their rooms and slam the doors behind them. James holds his door shut with his knee for a while before peering back out to see what came after them. Nothing is there. The slamming. The slamming of the doors wakes Herman's mother, who comes downstairs concerned and confused. She don't know what she's asking. What are you doing, boys? Like that, she's coming out. The boys tell her they heard footsteps downwards, and she immediately assumes there are burglars in the house. She assumes like that. Immediately she assumes what it is. Some robbers are there. They are going to rob something from my house. Like that, she assumes. We don't know what to do. Then immediately what happened? But his mother made one of her quick, incomparable decision. She flung up the window of her bedroom, which faced the bedroom windows of the house of a neighbor, picked up a shoe and whammed it through a pane of glass across the narrow space that separated the two houses. Glass tinkled into the bedroom occupied by a retired engraver named Bodwell and his wife. It was now about 2 o'clock of a moonless night. It's so dark. Moonless night. It's a moonless night. Clouds hung black and low. Bodwell was at the window in a minute, shouting, frothing a little, shaking his fist. He was over tensed. Why? Because of the breaking of the glass. Burglars in the house. Herman and I hadn't dared to tell her that it was not burglars but ghosts, for she was even more afraid of ghosts than of burglars. Bodwell at first thought that she meant there were burglars in his house. But finally he quieted down and called the police for us over an extension phone by his bed. The police arrived promptly and swarmed the house, opening cupboards and drawers searching for intruders. James, who is still only wearing a towel, is thoroughly questioned by an officer who considers him a suspicious character. His mother tells him to put clothes on, and the investigation continues. The police then come to the room of James' grandfather. When the police come through the attic door, they immediately realize that James' grandfather is a part of the family. In the small silence, we all heard a creaking in the attic. What's that? Snap. Grandfather was turning over in bed. 5 or 6 cars sprang for the attic door before I could intervene or explain. Before my explanation, they started to sprang the door. On seeing the attitude of the cops, the grandfather, he reacted negatively. I realized that it would be bad if they burst in on grandfather unannounced or even announced he was going through a phase in which he believed that General Meade's men Under steady hammering by Stonewall Jackson, were beginning to retreat and even desert. When I got to the attic, things were pretty confused. Grandfather had evidently jumped to the conclusion that the police were deserters. He didn't see them as the police, isn't it? He is seeing them. That means he considered them as the deserters who's going to attack his own army. So he came to the conclusion that the police were deserters from Mad's army trying to hide away in his attic. He bounded out of bed wearing a long flannel nightgown over long woolen pants, a nightcap, and a leather jacket around his chest. The cops must have realized at once that the indignant white-haired old man belonged to the house, but they had no chance to say so. Back, "Ye cowardly dog," like that, he started to roar. Who started to roar? Grandfather. He started to roar at the policeman because he thought like this. Back it, the lines, "Ye goddam lily-livered cattle." With that, he fetched the officer, who found the Zayda a flat-handed smack alongside his head that sent him sprawling. The others beat a retreat, but not enough. Grandfather grabbed Zayda's gun from its holster and let fly. The report seemed to crack the rafters. Smoke filled the attic. A cop cursed and shot his hand to his shoulder. Somehow, we all finally got downstairs again and locked the door against the old gentleman. He fired once or twice more in the darkness and then went back to bed. That was Grandfather, I explained to Joe, out of breath. He thinks you are deserter. I will say he does, said Joe. Ultimately, the police find no burglars in the house and are confused as to how one of their men is wounded. The family returns to their respective bedrooms. The next morning, the grandfather comes to breakfast, looking cheerful and well rested. Grandfather was fresh as a daisy and full of jokes at breakfast next morning. We thought at first he had forgotten all about what had happened, but he hadn't. Over his third cup of coffee, he glared at Herman and me. What was the idea of all them cops hooting round the house last night? He demanded. None of you bothered to leave a bottle of water beside my bed. Do you ever realize what it costs for a thirsty man to look for water in the dining room last night? He had us there. The story ends with the grandfather asking, a smirk on his face, what on earth the police had been doing raiding the house the night before. Now we are going to learn the words whichever helped us to understand the story well. Hullabaloo, lot of loud noise made by people who are excited. Patrolman, a patrolling police officer. Attic, a space or room inside or partly inside the roof of a building. Slamming, shutting a door or window forcefully and loudly. Gruffly, sadly. Intuitively, without conscious reasoning, instinctively. Whammed, struck something forcefully. Beveled, reduced to a sloping edge, rending, tearing to pieces, yanked, pulled with a jerk. Zither, musical instrument consisting of a flat wooden sound box with numerous strings stretched across it, placed horizontally and played with the fingers. Guinea. Pig, a domesticated tailless South American rodent originally raised for food. Hysterical, affected by wildly uncontrolled emotion. Creaking, making a squeaking sound when being moved, indignant, or showing anger or annoyance at what is perceived as unfair treatment. Holster, a holder made of leather for carrying handgun. Rafter, a beam forming part of the internal framework of a roof. Deserter, a person who leaves the armed force without permission. Advent, arrival. Quick cadenced, quick rhythmic flow of steps. Creaked, harsh, high-pitched sound. Trod, trampled. Peered, looked. Gripped, held tightly. Flung up, thrown up. Whammed, struck forcefully. Tinkled, caused to make a light sound. Engraver, someone who cuts designs. Enormously, hugely. Prevented, stopped. Commendably, appreciably. Hoarse, rough and harsh. Rending, splitting. Crisscrossed, formed a pattern of intersecting lines or paths. Stabbed, pierced. Closets, a tall cupboard with doors. Zither, a musical instrument. Snapped, broke. Retreat, withdraw. Indignant, extremely angry. Cowardly, not courageous. Rafters, beams forming part of the internal framework of a roof. Reluctant, unwilling, obviously, clearly. Wispy, feathery. Low down, mean, unfair. Thank you.